Sorry, buddy. We're just in the process of moving in here, so everything's still a
Dang.
disorganized mess.
How's it feeling?
Oh, it's good, man. It's been a blast, actually. It's funny how much more time this takes than you would expect, but no, it's been a lot of fun.
Totally. I mean, when I've moved out in the past and moved into a new place, I'm always like, yeah, like one day is probably enough to get
Totally.
all my shit out. But then you're working till like midnight or whatever.
Exactly.
Man, that's pretty cool though. How does it feel to be getting into your new place?
It's kind of weird. It's like surreal, right? So it was just like it continues to come in waves that like I think the further on we get in and then the longer it draws on, the more it like dawns on you like, oh yeah, this is our home. That's kind of cool.
Oh,
But
so
yeah, it's been a
cool.
blast, man.
Your little patch of land, man.
Exactly. Little emphasis.
Very small. That's gonna scale up. Yeah, just get a bunch of those little units around. You put them together. It's pretty much a mansion.
Exactly.
And then, is it the first time you and Amanda have lived together?
For like permanently, I guess. Like we've done maybe 2, 3 month stints in the past,
Yeah,
traveling, or I've gone over to Saskatoon when she was over there and stuff. But yeah, this is like the first time permanently.
dude. Dude, Daria's here right now. It's
Oh,
nice
that's
how,
awesome.
yeah. And then, so yeah, at the end of the month, we're going to Calgary and I'll
Okay.
stay with her in Canmore. And I'm getting some place. I have a place lined up in Calgary. I'm not sure if I'll take it yet, but we'll see what happens with other options. But I've just been finding what like I'm such less a degenerate when Daria's here. It's almost I'm
Oh,
like,
I
oh, thank
feel
God she's
that.
back.
You just have like that accountability that you're like, oh, okay, like I got to do something here.
Yeah, and you've got the judgment of a beautiful woman
Totally.
like, at
That's
all
powerful
times.
stuff.
It's like, yeah, if you want a motivator, that's one of them. Get a beautiful woman in your house, like judging your every
Literally.
move. Man, okay, slight change of topics. Tell me about your pod. How's that going? And if you've,
Oh
or the
yeah,
episodes
so
you've
it's
done.
been on pause for a while. So I guess a little background on that is I started that. I think it was probably March of last year, kind of right as like lockdown was like starting to hit, because we got pulled from clinical duty and kind of sent home to do like some work online and stuff, but the schedule like really lightened up for us, and I had kind of like switched, I guess, career plans. I was really like interested in emergency medicine at the time and kind of had built up a resume surrounding that, and then when we got pulled out, I was kind of changing my mind towards anesthesia, and everything's very competitive nowadays, that you want to have like a competitive file, a competitive CV. So I wanted to do something that would, I guess, show interest in the field. And also, my thoughts were that if I were to kind of make a podcast, it would force me, as we kind of talked about, avoiding being a degenerate, and force me to study and learn the content. So then I would perform better on electives and so forth. But yeah, I haven't done an episode in probably 5, 6 months now. But at the time, I didn't realize like how, like, I guess, involved it would be to like research everything, script it all out. You record it and then you listen to yourself and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound good, I'm going to do it again. And then it
Uh,
gets to a point where you record it 2, 3 times and you're like, listen, like it's just gotta go out now. Nobody cares if you stumble on 1 or 2 words here.
yeah.
But it's been a lot of fun. I think the coolest part of it was I had a classmate reach out to me like maybe 4 months after one of the episodes or whatever. And they were like, I was literally just driving in my car when it dawned on me that that was you. And they're like, I had no
Holy,
idea. So it was kind of
that's
cool.
sweet,
I,
man.
yeah, I did not like, because I didn't tell anybody that I was doing it, like mostly out of embarrassment, that it was just like, I'll put it out there. And then if anybody's looking for it, it's there, but I'm not going to like advertise it and let people know that I'm doing this. So it was kind of cool that somebody like organically found it. And actually, this is a great reminder, because I had a younger year reach out to me maybe a month ago, wanting to get involved with it, and said like, hey, can I help you out with that? And I was like, yeah. So it's going to be kind of cool to have like that mentorship piece of it now too, that younger
Dang,
years are
yeah.
involved. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing it. Actually, I got to get back on that.
That's sweet. And I can relate, like trying to do this YouTube. It's a lot of work putting out online content, hey? Like just
Totally.
even overcoming the learning curve of learning how to like edit a bit, trying to get the audio a bit better and thumbnails and all this stuff. Like it takes a lot of freaking time.
Absolutely.
I do think you get a lot out of it though. It's like or at least for me, I've been finding, just the skill development of editing and all that I'm thinking is worth it. And also learning how to, I guess, like put yourself out there in public, although very small public at this point,
That's
but still.
huge, though. That's huge. Like for me, I really struggled with that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, like what if my classmates find this and listen to it? Or what if I say something wrong in the podcast and somebody listens to this and then they're like, oh, Blake's an idiot, blah, blah, blah. So it's like,
Totally.
yeah, it's like that fear of judgment. And then you got to kind of like sit back and realize like, nobody cares. Like
No one
honestly, like
cares.
no one cares. So
People are actually happy.
totally. Yeah. That was to me like when one of my classmates actually sent me the message and they're like, oh, that's so cool. I was like, oh, cool. Like, you know what I mean? You don't really
Yeah.
expect that. But yeah, no, it was
Something that motivated me to kind of change my strategy into this more pod form instead of like trying to do individual videos is this idea I actually heard on another YouTube video. Have you heard of Naval Ravikant?
no, I haven't.
So he's like a investor turned semi-philosopher. And this idea really stuck with me. It's something like now with the internet, everyone has access to free, unlimited leverage
Right.
for your ideas and your time. You can put out one video and it can reach millions and millions of people, and you spent 1 hour on it. So you can leverage like the content of that video infinitely. And then I was like, my friends are pretty cool. They're pretty bright. We're all like at the start of our careers. And if we could like share decent ideas, just like maybe even at random, who knows if we'll be able to, but just like someone in our friend group has to be the one like putting out these ideas and like leveraging the value of them.
I love it. I love it.
Totally. It's like normally leverage is freaking expensive. Like you think about margin or debt
Totally.
or hiring someone or whatever other type of leverage there is out there. But yeah, the internet's free. It just takes I guess it's the cost of your time and the dedication to the craft almost. But also I'm just hoping like the quality will improve just by sticking with it and doing like 100 of them and just slowly iterating.
Dude, totally. It's crazy how much like of a rabbit hole you can go down with that, with the audio, with the video. Like I was telling you, it's all packed away now. But like when I first started, like I did an episode on the like iPhone and doing that, and then I listened to it in my car. I was like, oh, this sounds terrible. So then I went and got like a similar mic to what you had, and then did an episode or two on that, and then realized that I didn't have as much control with that, and then ended up going to like an XLR mic that required like a different audio interface. So then I had a Zoom recorder that's plugged through the XLR cable into the pod mic,
Oh,
and
dang.
yeah, so
Yeah,
it's you go up like pretty quick, like in I don't know, like it does become like a law of diminishing returns. I found like with the audio quality, but video is like a whole other loophole, rabbit hole
totally.
rather.
Totally, man. And yeah, it's like, it's interesting because I've been observing what I watch and what I get value in. The quality, I guess it's important. It's off putting if the quality's bad, but the quality itself isn't what attracts me. It's more like the merit of the idea or the character that I'm watching or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I'll just try to slowly make it better, I guess. But
I love it.
yeah, I'm definitely not a nerd for the audio and editing and stuff. That stuff feels like a grind. Man, when are you firing up work?
Start kind of like I guess July 1st is our like official date, but starting this week we have some like courses to do and some orientations and like health and safety briefings and et cetera, et cetera. So there's like a lot of housekeeping stuff that's been needed to be done in between, but like July 1st is kind of like official, like see you there
Totally.
kind of thing.
That's sick, man. So what's gonna be your role, or how would you describe it? I guess let's go into that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be starting my first year of a 5-year anesthesia residency. I guess your roles and responsibilities as like an R1 is R1 being like first year resident. And we kind of like abbreviate it as like R1 is your first year resident, R2 is like a second year resident, and then that kind of goes up to R5. And then afterwards, some people will do like a fellowship, so which is like even more like subspecializing, I guess. So for myself, using that as an example, if I were to do like 5 years of anesthesia, then in my 6th year, I could do like a cardiac anesthesia fellowship. So become like subspecialized in doing the anesthetics for cardiac surgery. So that would be like a fellowship that might be another year or two afterwards. But as an R1, you're there, you're a doctor at this point. I put like quotation marks around it because I found that, you know what, it was my research supervisor in my undergraduate who said it the best, that they said like kind of the further on you get in your education, the more you realize that you don't know. And then it's like it becomes this like inverse paradox almost, where you have done so much schooling and so much education, but you like feel like you haven't, like you feel
Yeah.
like you have so much to learn and stuff, but you're like a doctor at this point, but you're kind of like a doctor with training wheels and you have a lot of support. So for myself, my first year is they call it like a rotating internship. So it gets you exposure to like a lot of diverse fields of medicine. So I'll do like 8 months of all sorts of things. Like I'll do a month of pediatrics, a month of general surgery, a month of emergency medicine, a couple months of ICU, and then we get like a month or two to kind of pick what we want to do with that. And then I'll do 4 months of anesthesia. So anesthesia is being like my bread and butter. So they kind of keep that in there, that kind of, I guess, keep you familiar with your craft while still kind of improving your foundation, your skill sets in these other areas that I won't necessarily be doing that kind of medicine, but all of those topics are going to be involved in what I am doing. So it's kind of important to have like a strong foundation and understanding of the general things there. But my day to day is going to kind of vary month to month depending on what service I am. For medicine, you'll show up, round on your patients, meet up with the team, discuss the patient list. So you'll go through like room this is the issues, this is what we have to do about it. You'll kind of run the list. If you're on more of like a medicine ward, whereas surgery is you'd show up, you'd round on your patients that had surgery like the last day or two, make sure that they're doing well, making sure that they're kind of progressing as you would expect them to. And then you'd go down to the operating room after that and either scrub in or do the consults as they come in. And then for anesthesia, which is my bread and butter, same idea. I would show up. I'll have read about all the patients the night before. So you'll kind of know what's on tap for the day. Go in, set up the room, check the machines, and then you'll go and meet the patient before you're attending. So who's the actual doctor who's kind of overseeing you shows up, get the IV in, get all the IV stuff set up, and then depending on who you're working with, you might kind of explain like, hey, so I met the patient, here's the things that we're concerned about, or there's nothing we're concerned about. There's always something you're concerned about. I shouldn't say nothing you're concerned about, but there's always something. And then you kind of explain like what you want to do for the anesthetic. And then there's going to be some teaching points there. They might say, oh, you considered doing this, or, oh, actually, I normally do it that way. And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things about anesthesia is there's so many different ways of accomplishing kind of the same thing in a sense, but I guess it becomes your skill set and the different tools you have and have developed and have become comfortable with. So it was kind of the one of the fun things I've learned through
Yeah,
that.
man. Well, my mom's working in surgery now, so she's a nurse. And it was funny. She was telling me about how the old school doctors do like the old school anesthesiologist up in Whitehorse does things so much differently than the new people coming out of school. And she's just like, oh, it's so like brutal. They just like knock them out, no care, like just wake them back up. But man, yeah, that's pretty exciting. And then how are you feeling now that the academic side of it is essentially done? I know you've been in and out of residencies, but what's this step now that you're Dr. Blake and
It
moving into the hospital. What's that
is,
step change feel like?
it's like, yeah, I think once again, it'll probably start hitting me once I get in there. Part of it's like a little bit overwhelming because all of a sudden, once you have that title on your name, there's a bunch of responsibility that's attached to that.
Yeah,
I found that like when I was in my fourth year rotations, it would be easy enough to almost use like, oh, I'm just a medical student as like a cop out. Like you had that kind of cop out
totally.
that, oh, I can't write orders. So orders are like if a patient needs something done, you would write it down in an order sheet, and then the nurses or the admin staff or whoever would see that and then kind of order it and have it arranged. So as a
Yeah,
medical student here, we're not allowed writing orders unless you have somebody basically co-signing it or saying like, yeah, you can do that. So if they asked for something and I wasn't sure, like, oh, I don't know if the patient needs that or not, you could have that as like an, oh, sorry, I'm just a medical student. Like I'll have to chat with somebody about that. Whereas you don't really have that anymore because you're a doctor and you can write your own orders.
totally.
So you don't have that kind of like safety net, which is a little bit scary, but it just means that you'll have to kind of find another way to be like, hey, sorry, give me 10 minutes. I'm going to look into that. Or, you know what, I'm going to go and chat with somebody about that before I order it. So
Yeah,
it'll be something else. But yeah, you
totally.
just, yeah. So it's kind of nice because I guess the flip side of that is there was a lot of things that you would see that you've become very comfortable with, that you're like, oh, I know that this is what this person needs, but I'm a medical student and I can't write the orders for that. So I'm going to have to go and hunt somebody down to co-sign this and say like, yeah, you can do that. When in reality, it was like, we both kind of knew that's what needed to be done. So
Yeah,
it's nice in that sense that now you're able to kind of take that step and
the
make those kind of judgment
accountability
calls.
on
Yeah.
yourself. Thinking back on all the jobs I've had, or even parengineering, it's like the more and more accountability I've had, the better job I've had. It's
Oh,
like a job
absolutely.
I've done. Sorry, it's like a little human nature, like I don't know, hack or something. Maybe not
Totally.
hack, but
No, I totally hear what you're saying, that it's just like that increased responsibility, almost like kind of forces you to like improve in a sense.
totally, it forces it out. Man, so when you think back on med school, now that you've gone through it, and even undergrad, did you feel like you took full advantage so you're now prepared to go to work, or were there things you might have done differently in hindsight, or how do you even think back on your undergrad and medical school experience?
Yeah, I feel like I can take this kind of, we'll take it two ways. The things that I've done well and the things that like I realize now that as I'm starting to get older, that I could have taken a lot more advantage of. Um, I guess the things that I've done well is like, I'm kind of happy that I kept an open mind kind of throughout my schooling, and then keeping an open mind like ultimately allowed me to kind of switch career paths, as we had kind of chatted about, that I was planning on going one route, but keeping an open mind, encountered something else that I absolutely loved and realized it was a better fit for me because I had that open mind and thought about it. And I had actually reached out to like some school advisors and so forth, so talked to mentors about it, but keeping an open mind has been kind of like imperative, like throughout my university and my medical schooling, and has kind of culminated in me ending up where I am today. So I'm glad that that's something that I kind of adopted earlier, and to kind of continue to try and, I guess, practice. And then there's just a bunch that are popping into my mind of things that I wish I have done. So I guess we'll go down that
Yeah, let's
road.
hear it.
So I think for me, I guess we'll preface this with COVID lockdowns. I don't know, March last year, the gyms closed down, and I started like totally getting off a routine. I used that as like a crutch and an excuse to like avoid working out. Usually I'm super into soccer and play soccer once a week with a team. And then I like going to the gym kind of in between that. And I think that I haven't been in a gym in like a year, and there was like just so many excuses. And I think that's something that really stood out to me, was just how easy it is to make excuses about things and like put off things that need to be done. And then at this stage, you know what I mean? I'm still young, but time continues to tick, and it like almost becomes more and more imperative to start developing the good habits to like make sure that you stay on a routine with this and not fall off and get like as derailed as I did. So for me, it was like very easy to be like, oh, like lockdowns are just going to last 2 weeks or a month. I'll get back to the gym then. And then as we kind of know how that story continued to progress, it would have been very easy for me to go and pick up some sort of like body weight fitness or whatever. But I continued to kind of use that as like an excuse not to. And I focused on other things, but I think I've started to notice now that I'm definitely in like not the best version of myself when I'm not doing those things. I'm not as sharp mentally. I don't have as much energy as I normally do. I drink more caffeine than I normally would. So you start realizing that that's something that I didn't do in university. In medical school for the first 2 years, I was really good about it. But then your third and fourth year hit when you're in the hospital and you'll do call shifts and stuff. So like I was very spotty there again. And then that kind of like, I guess, had the COVID thing come in, and then that culminated in me just getting completely off rail. So that's something that I really want to like work on in the next 5 years, is like finding a way. And I found in the past, like having a buddy to go to the gym with has been like the best. Like if you have somebody else who's like super devoted, it's like that's a hack right there for you. Like find somebody who's just like devoted to it and just tag onto their schedule. But I'm gonna have to do something like that to get back on track. And other things that I'm realizing now that as I'm starting to get older and stuff, like is just you really have to make the time for things like this. You know what I mean? Like I have been terrible about that through my undergraduate, even during medical school as well. Like I was a little bit better in medical school, but I wasn't great. As far as like making time for my friends, making time for my family, and making sure that you continue to like put the energy into those relationships and enjoy that time, because as we mentioned, time's just like flying over here. So I don't want to be kind of in a situation where you're realizing that you didn't spend enough time with somebody, or you didn't put enough time and energy into something, and the boat sailed on that one.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of something Jordan Peterson always says, where he says like, make a schedule that you're genuinely excited about acting out. What I made a similar mistake in terms of kind of like grinding, maybe not grinding too hard, that maybe comes off wrong, but I sacrificed a lot in undergrad to get great grades. In hindsight, I'm like, it would have been easy to play on a couple more sports teams, go out a little bit more, and genuinely like make some time for fun more frequently. Because like at the end of the day, I don't even know, there's like a diminishing returns with the studying, where it's like, yeah, you did 4 hours, you would have got a similar grade if you did 3. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe the sacrifice is what got you to where you are, but
that's like such an interesting topic that you bring up there, is just that like whole concept of like grades, like our grades, our test scores, like is that what we should be measuring for, like usually when we kind of insinuate high grades, it's usually for some sort of like postgraduate program or something. Like admissions into something else is usually what that falls into. And it kind of like raises the question of like, is this the most efficient way of doing this, or is this the most productive way of doing this? Because
I'll hop in. So so let's focus on undergrad a bit. Did you find that many of your courses gave you some like pragmatic content that you are happy that you learned about and that has improved your life? Or how do you think about the content that you're exposed to in your undergrad? And let's talk about what you did in undergrad.
Yeah, so I did a Bachelor of Science. I ended up doing an honors thesis in my fourth year, which we'll chat about. And then my like major was microbiology for that. I don't want to like offend anybody or be rude or anything, but we'll try and keep it candid. Totally. In that I found that there was a lot of content, and I don't know if this is like specific to biology and biological sciences, because when we were going through the programs, people would kind of joke about it that biology was all memorization and regurgitation on tests, and then you kind of forget everything afterwards. And to a point, there's some truth in that. In that, I found that especially like for biology, like to really get the mid 90s, top 90s on your scores, you kind of had to know the whole chapter in and out, because any little detail that could come up, it was you had to have known that bacteria name, or you had to have known that process or something. There was a lot less kind of like applied knowledge to it. Like I started to encounter that in a couple courses in like my third and fourth year, where you would have to know the content, but then they would give it to you in the test and you'd have to like work with new information and actually think, you know what I mean? It wasn't just like brute memorization and regurgitation anymore. It kind of forced you to like look at it. You have new information, you need to synthesize that, work with it, and then come to a new solution from that. And as I mentioned, this could have been specific to my minor that, or my major rather, that it was very memorization heavy, but I found for myself, oftentimes that would lead up to near the end of my degree. It wasn't so much cramming, but it would be studying like 2 weeks before the exam, learning things to, as you mentioned, like a ridiculous level that the law of diminishing returns is totally there, that, you've put in an extra 5, 6, 7 hours to get maybe 1 or 2% extra on there, but didn't change things at the time. You write the test, you do well on it, you knew everything on there, and then ask me that stuff in 6 months' time. And most of it I didn't retain because I wasn't applying it. I didn't really have a use for it in my day-to-day life there. And if you're not kind of using and synthesizing and working with that information, you don't really remember it. Whereas I mentioned the honors thesis there. The reason that I never thought I really wanted to get involved in research, but I bumped into an instructor in my third year who created tests in that format that forced you to really think, like take that new knowledge, synthesize it, and work with it. And I wasn't used to that. I did substantially lower on those exams than, not substantially, but I did lower on those exams than the ones that were just brute memorization, because it was kind of like a new way of thinking for myself at that point. And ultimately, I approached that instructor to get involved in their lab, because that was somebody that I saw that I wanted mentorship from. I think I got denied 3 or 4 times before ultimately my persistence kind of got my foot in the door there. But yeah, that year, like under that mentorship of the people in that lab, of that kind of like benchtop research, and then with that instructor, were kind of invaluable. And that was hands down like the best learning in my undergraduate degree. And it's kind of crazy just how much more I got out of that like 1 year with those people than I did kind of the preceding 3 years in the classrooms.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. I found something similar. As you know, I went to college initially and did a tech program called power engineering. Then I worked for a little while. Then I went back and did an undergrad. So coming in a bit older, I was more focused on, trying to find information and knowledge that I genuinely cared about, that I thought could be useful. And I had my eyes open for that, for the majority of my coursework. Like, it was maybe a few classes I slacked on, but for the most part, like, I was really scouring to try to find some useful stuff. And I found most courses in undergrad, tell me if you agree with this, probably about 80% of it is fluff and things that are hard to apply. Whereas 20% of it, if you really grab those models and understand them well, you can like use them in your worldview almost. It's like they're useful, there's something to them that you can actually start noticing in the world around you. And so when I found that, I was very, excited. That's, I guess, the point of undergrad. To your point, though, working in the research labs was useful for me, and just seeing, I guess, the academic game, I would always think of it, at work. But there was also some aspects of the research game and the academic grind, working as a research assistant under the, research supervisor who's under the PhD, who's under that tenured professor. And there were some parts of that I really disliked, but it was awesome getting like some real responsibility there for sure. But I found definitely the most valuable things that came out of my undergraduate was, like you mentioned, the synthesizing and actual thinking of information that I then had to like put in writing. Like definitely my big writing projects were the most valuable for me because it's like feels real, when you really like track down, I guess it would be, you track down the evidence for your argument and you lay it out in a concise and hopefully convincing way. And that exercise has really like sharpened my thinking on a lot of topics.
Totally.
Yeah,
And
man.
you know what? Like, if you were to kind of like go through a list of skills that like I can definitely say that on the other end of my degree, like improved, tenfold or whatever it is, like writing was definitely up there for me, that I became like a way stronger writer, like by the end of my degree than I did going into it, even though I didn't really take any English classes. Like it was mostly through report writing and so forth. And exactly as you kind of like alluded to with research and finding papers that back up your argument and then synthesizing that argument and so forth, that was a skill that has like definitely paid dividends. That, if you were to kind of like look at it and say like, out of the amount of money you spent for your undergraduate degree, was it worth it to develop these skills? Like that alone probably was. That like I could have used those skills like in a lot of different career paths. It's not like unique to the skill or like the I guess career that I took with it. But I don't know if that was like a universal skill that everybody develops. It would be kind of interesting to see like a list of what people find the most useful skills are that they pulled out of like an undergraduate degree.
Totally. And I think with writing, probably undergrad in general, I've found that you get out of it what you put into it.
Totally.
Like if you put in tons and tons of effort into learning how to write and research, you'll get out tons and tons of value. If you wait till
Totally.
the last minute, you'll not get really much value. Um, yeah, it's interesting you say that though, thinking about, okay, well, I spent this amount of time and money and opportunity cost on undergraduate. Was it worth it in hindsight? And for me, it's been interesting. It's like oftentimes I felt like no in boring classes, but all it takes is, or it took like one or two classes that changed the way I think for me to be like, yeah, actually, like, the whatever tuition is 50K or whatever by the end of it was probably all worth it just to like get a deep understanding of this one topic.
That's, yeah, like such an interesting concept. I have like kind of wrestled with that back and forth. And the more I think about it, like for me, I always viewed my undergraduate as a stepping stone. Like I knew I wanted to go to medical school afterwards. So for me, it was like, this is a stepping stone towards that goal. Um, but if I was in a situation where I didn't know what kind of career path I wanted to seek out, and I was like unsure of what I wanted to do, knowing what I know now, I definitely wouldn't be going to university to like do an arts degree or something in the meantime to like try and figure it out. I think I probably would have taken the year to just do a ton of shadowing. Like, you know what I mean? Find a profession that interests me, get on the phone with some people. Hey, can I follow you around? And just kind of like getting exposure to like different careers like in that. I think that would have been a lot more like valuable to
Yeah.
me. And then using that time to do other things like in developing other skills. That I think that's maybe what university does kind of provide, is like a bit of a schedule and some responsibilities that for a younger person like myself, I don't know if I would have necessarily had the discipline to like work on skills on my own schedule, and like be productive on my own schedule. That, by having these essay deadlines and so forth, that does kind of provide that structure that you need. And at least I shouldn't say that you need, but that I needed. So yeah, very interesting. I think the trades are honestly like not pushed enough in high school though. Like I see, because to preface this, like my dad, my parents rather, build houses on the side. They both did like full-time careers, but they would build houses on the side. We would move into it, live in it. So very familiar with construction, and kind of seeing how, I guess, much availability there is as far as like careers in the trades right now, that you could absolutely make a huge like career in the trades. Like
Yeah.
right now, like it wouldn't take much to go get your seal or get your training, just do phenomenal work and provide phenomenal service with some pride in it. Show up, like really like put your heart into it. Find a trade that you really love. It wouldn't take long to like get a good reputation here, because there's just so many people that just kind of show up to like punch the clock and get out as quick as possible, that
Yeah.
if you could find a trade that you really enjoyed and you were passionate about, like it would be so easy to do well. And I think that that's
Yeah.
something that high school doesn't really do enough, is kind of
Yeah.
expose people to trades.
I worked as a framer for many
Hmm.
years throughout, yeah, after high school, actually, until I was probably about 22 in the summers when I was going to college, and also a year or two actually full time. It's great. Like I worked with tons of trades people as a power engineer at the hydroelectric plant. You
Totally.
work with heavy duty mechanics, electricians, and plumbers, and pretty much everyone. Like you're saying, the trades are a fantastic opportunity. What I noticed a lot was the disciplined, intelligent, passionate people would do incredibly well.
Hmm.
But that was maybe like 1 in 10 people. The rest of the people, I shouldn't say one, I don't know if it's 1 in 10. There's a
Sure.
lot of competent people
Yeah.
in the trades. But then there was a subsection of people who were just there, maybe similar to undergrad. Maybe it's a similar phenomenon where they were just there because they had no idea what to do. They just needed a job. And the physical labor aspect of the trades wore them down.
Right.
They weren't super passionate about it. They were doing it because they needed a job. And a lot of those people were quite miserable, very miserable. And when I was in my early 20s, being around some people on my crew, I was like, oh, this is what happens if you're not like passionate about your work, but you end up trapped there just because you need the salary, and it's a hard physical job and you're in pain a
Totally.
lot. And yeah, but it is interesting to think, a lot of people in undergrad that I met when I was going on campus, I would often think, I was like, it's like, you're here, you're not that engaged. Maybe you should be out, working with your hands, seeing what it's like in the world, actually
Totally.
working. It's like you're spending this time smoking weed and playing League of Legends. It's like, maybe you
Yeah.
should, it's, yeah. So there's a
Totally.
trade-off for sure.
Yeah, and that's I guess an experience that we both share, is that kind of little bit of employment history and manual labor, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder like how much that was pivotal, because I vividly remember, university's what, like a 3 month summer or something like that, three and a
Yeah.
half months
Three,
or
four.
something.
Yeah.
So I would work construction like during that 3 to 4 months. Usually would work construction during the day and then pick up like a serving job in the night.
Yeah.
And then the two employments together would be able to like pay off my tuition for the coming year. And I would remember that like by the end of that 3.5 months, like you were just so done with
So
waiting
tired.
tables and doing construction during the day. And it was probably a mix of just like, because I probably did 60, 70 hours a week to like pay for university
Yeah.
and so forth. So it was like a lot of work that maybe I wouldn't have felt that way if it wasn't that much. But by the end of those summers, man, like I was like, okay, like this is why I'm in school. This is why I'm like working to get to where I want to be, because
Yeah.
I was like, this just isn't a good fit for me. And this is definitely like a part-time job kind of thing. But yeah, I wonder if that's like, because there's definitely people that, you know what I mean? Like they're super passionate about that. And like you would meet them at the job site, as you mentioned. I wouldn't be able to put a number on it, but you kind of mentioned those passionate people, and you'd see that in the restaurants, you'd see that in the job sites, and those people were always the ones that, you know what I mean, did the best work and like showed up, and like you didn't have to worry about them getting their job done, or you'd watch them in the restaurants and consistently they got the highest tips, and they had the most comment cards that would come in ranting and raving about them. And those were the people that, you know, you'd look on the Yelp or the Google reviews, and like you would know that that was their table, like that person was like waiting on that table. So it's like super interesting that if you can find that field that you're like very passionate about, if you can find that thing, that it just becomes so much easier to do like really, really good work.
Yeah.
And then I guess the question there is like, how do we expose more people to like find that? Like, how do you get more young people like discovering their passion? And is that even like a real thing for everybody? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
is there really an employment for everybody that can produce like that or something kind of similar to that, versus like how many people are always just going to be at a job and it's going to be nothing more than a job? Like that's something I've always
Totally.
been interested in.
I guess something that came to me when you were describing that, it's hard to change paths and change jobs and try new
Totally.
things for a lot of reasons. You know, number one, like a lot of people burden themselves financially to the point where they can't take 4 years off to go get a degree to see if they like whatever, or they can't leave the job site and try, you know, what hairdressing or whatever they think they might be passionate about. Another thing is it's hard to be a beginner again, you know, like it's
Yeah,
very hard to say, you know, I'm fairly competent at this, but I don't care. I'm going to leave this behind. I've built up this skill set. And like, let's say for myself in power engineering, it's like I went to school for this. I did practicums. I have some specific knowledge. I'm getting paid incredibly well. I
totally.
know it's probably not an exact fit, but am I really willing to give it all up and start at the bottom again? And it's like, it's friggin' a hard decision. Although I do think of a quote, I can't remember who said it. It's like, you know, how many people, if you climb up, you're climbing a mountain for your whole life and you're trying to summon it, but you get 3/4 of the way up and you realize you've taken the wrong path and you have to climb that all the way back down and restart. It's like, it's a daunting task.
Totally it is. And then
But
I
yeah,
guess like, how do you, like, is there a way to, I'm thinking like high school students here, like I'm reflecting back on myself in high school. Like I had a very clear idea of where I wanted to end up and what I wanted to do. But, you know, I would say that I was the anomaly of my friend group, you know, like I
yeah,
was 1 in 10 that kind of had that idea. But how do you expose individuals to career paths, to different options, like without kind of subjecting them to that sunken opportunity? You know what I mean? Like that, how do we get exposure to like these different options without kind of creating like a big amount of debt that then needs to be paid
yeah.
off? Or like it's interesting. Like I wonder if there's ways that we can do that in kind of the way that the education system is set up at this moment,
Yeah.
or is it
Well,
always just going to be kind of how it is?
Well, do you think now with podcasts, YouTube, and people putting out content, like you can have mentors or whatever, you can learn from people from any field essentially at all times. Um,
Totally.
and I'm shocked at just how much I've learned about so many different fields just from listening to people on podcasts. So I guess that's one mass exposure that's taking place in our society. But I've found the downside to that is it filters for incredibly exceptional individuals, and it starts to we've talked about this a tiny bit in the past. For
Yeah.
me, it starts to shift what you think is reasonable and realistic. You know, you start to think it's like, okay, well, what are my options for a career? Like when I was in my early 20s, I'd listen to so many pods. It's like I need to be, an incredibly well-renowned professor or a CEO of a innovative tech company or
Totally.
whatever stand-up comedian or whatever, like a hugely successful stand-up comedian. It's not exactly realistic because it filters for the most successful
Totally it does.
people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm not sure if that's a great solution. I don't know. Do you have any ideas on that? Like if you could help out high school people in some way, what would you say?
Yeah, honestly, like to me, I would I just like I find that shadowing just such a valuable experience. You know what I mean? Like being at the job, seeing the kind of people that are in that field. Because I think there's something to be said about finding your people and like who you really fit in
Yeah.
with. You know what I mean? I noticed that in medicine that there were different fields that different like fields would attract different kind of personalities, and that it was very easy to find like a group of like-minded people in different fields. And it wasn't like a huge deal, but there was definitely like you'd see like the humor would be a little bit different here versus um, people would be a little bit organized in this, more organized in this field, or like there was traits that different fields kind of attracted. Whereas when I was in construction, that was like a completely different kind of individual. That the dinner conversations that I was having on the construction site, I actually had to like really work on that because I had spent so much time on the construction sites that you go into medicine and then all of a sudden you're like sitting there and you're like, oh, okay, like you got to be really careful here. Like we got to change things up a little bit because you're used to working on the job, and that's a
Yeah.
completely different culture than it is there. So
I often
I think
felt,
that
oh,
having
sorry, go ahead.
exposed, sorry, I was saying like I think if we could do like a month or two that students had to like clock like 20 different professions that they went and shadowed for a day or two. You know what I mean? Like send them to follow a registered massage therapist for a day, or like make them go and seek these opportunities out and like explore these different career paths. Go and follow a framer for a day, go and follow a barber for a day, go and follow a doctor for a day. And I understand that like there's feasibility issues there, but if you could do something along those lines, I think that that might perhaps expose a few more people. I don't think it would be like a universal thing, but I feel like, it might at least plant a couple seeds, and
Man,
who knows?
great idea. So something I've noticed that's been kind of interesting, and I think it's true. I know it was true for me coming out of high school. You're exposed to so few careers, or your ideas of what careers are possible are so limited that it's like 80% of high school students graduating are probably aiming at like one of five careers. I've been helping select recipients of a scholarship, so I get to read all these applications, right? And I've noticed it's like, what do you want to be out of high school? It's like doctor, lawyer, teacher, nurse, engineer, right?
Right.
So that's like 80 or 90% of people, just because like you're saying, it's hard to know exactly. But once you go through university and things, you realize like how many fields there are out there. Yeah. I mean, is there even something wrong with that though? All
Yeah,
those,
totally.
yeah, like,
Is there? But I
yeah,
mean, the follow-up question to that is, have you ever read a paper that says, I want to be a respiratory therapist? Like
yeah, no,
phenomenal career that like nobody knows anything about, you know what I
yeah,
mean, in healthcare, that like if I had been exposed to it in high school, that very much could have been something that I ended up pursuing. But
man,
I had no
so
idea
true.
it existed, right? So it's like, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, on the last podcast, the first one I did was with Hunter, my buddy, my power
Mhm.
engineering buddy, and we kind of explored power engineering, or that was the intent of our podcast, and it was for that exact reason because it changed our lives remarkably, right? Like it's a fantastic career, and so few people know about it that
Totally.
there's something so valuable about having that aim, and it's much less costly and it's shorter, and you're able in your early 20s to come out, have a huge salary in comparison to the average and then figure out what you want to do. And you're still only 21 and you've already essentially made a stable living for yourself.
Totally.
Yeah. Those tech programs they're very underrated. Very underrated.
Oh, where's this podcast for 16-year-old me?
You're too busy playing video games or something. You're definitely not. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough though. It's tough. Like, yeah, I guess just individually, it's like if you can, I don't know, maybe coach or find a way to be around younger people and hopefully be a decent role model. I mean, when I think of my life, it's like the role models I've had have really pointed me in the right direction.
Totally
It's nothing.
invaluable.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, people are going to figure it out. I don't know if you can even like point them or even move them. It's more they watch your actions and mimic if they're admirable. Okay, so you're going into residency now. You're 5 years in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to make the most of that city? Fantastic city.
Yeah, man, fantastic city. All right, I'm already like super excited. So, to preface this, like we bought a place that's about a 15-minute walk to like BGH, which is where we're going to be working. So I'm like, super pumped to be able to walk to work. I had done that like a couple times, like during my medical school, like rotations. And I read a study like way back when, and who knows how well this study was done or whatever, but it essentially looked at happiness. And one of the best correlates with happiness was like your commute to work, that if you had like a really short commute to work, that those people generally were happier. So like for me, being able to walk to work for 15 minutes, I'm banking that that's going to like help the happiness score a little bit here. So and I did find like being able to walk to work, like preface this, when it's not pouring rain, at least it's such a good way to start the day. Just like a little 15-minute walk over to work, clear the mind, get the heart rate up a little bit, and then coming home, same thing. That it was just like such a good like way to kind of like wind down, and then you get home and you're like, so I'm like super pumped about that. So that's one thing that I think is like honestly like undervalued, that like when I was in Kelowna, like you just commute all the time, and I love driving. Like I love driving, that I love my car and so forth. But there's just something about walking that's like, I'm really excited about that. There's like a Home Depot 15 minutes down the road. The amount of times that I've just like walked to the Home Depot to like pick something up now, it's like, it is just so nice to like be able to go and like have that 15-20 minutes to kind of reset. That it was something that I definitely did not do enough of in Kelowna. Like, and Kelowna is gorgeous, and like all the opportunity in the world to do that. But I think when you're in the city, it almost like forces you to, because it's like, I'm not going to drive there. I'm not going to like take a single bus stop over there. Like I'll just walk it. And I'm like pretty pumped about that.
Oh man. Yeah, I've been trying to walk every day, or for the most part, like down along Gyro and Kelowna along the lake and back. Totally. It's amazing how much better it makes you feel.
It's so crazy, man, because it sounds like something so stupid. You know what I mean? When somebody's like, "Oh, you should go for a walk," it's like, okay, buddy, like, yeah, cool story. But like when you actually get in the habit of doing it, it's like instantly, like I feel like healthier and happier, like just taking that like little like break from the day. And like sometimes I'll listen to a podcast, or sometimes it'll just be like, man, I'll listen to the sound of whatever else is going around, and you're just like totally disconnected. It's nice.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to say, are you listening to pods, or are you just walking without any headphones? I know for me, like I love walking no headphones and just letting the thoughts run. And I think we've talked about this a bit in the past. It does feel like if you do that enough, you're like clearing out the inbox of your thoughts, and eventually you reach a point where you're just able to enjoy the walk. You're not constantly in your head, like going over things.
There's almost like a little bit of a meditative aspect to it that you've kind of suggested in the past, that just kind of disconnecting, that it's almost like a form of meditation, that you can just kind of like let the thoughts run, and then just try and get like more of a clear head and just take everything in, be in the moment there.
Yeah, man. Okay, so here's one observation. Jumping back a tiny bit, I was going to ask you about I've really noticed this. I guess what would it be? It's like a trend or something, or an outlook difference between people that went through trades and tech programs compared to a lot of young people I've met in my undergraduate degree. So before going into undergraduate, I was definitely the type of person that I would kind of always consider, I'd be like, where is my place in our system in Canada? What is my place, and how can I do my best to kind of optimize my behavior for my current situation to get me to where I want to go? The system itself, I viewed as, I was like, there's not much I can do about it. I get one vote, I get my own actions. But besides that, there's a lot of things that aren't exactly worth consideration because they're not moving me in any direction. They're essentially useless for me at this exact moment. And a lot of my peers were like that. At university, you get a lot of focus on the system, arguing about politics, arguing about, taxes, welfare, all that stuff, all these conversations, and much less focus on how do you actually act in your life, in the systems, to do the best you can manage, right? So it's like a difference between like actual action compared to, I guess, theorizing about potential solutions to our broken systems. I don't know how we can even say that in Canada, but, critiques of our systems is a majority of the conversation at university, or at least a substantial amount. Have you noticed that, or what do you think about that? Is that a
Man,
fair
that is
observation?
that is a super interesting observation, and I don't know if it's necessarily one that I've like kind of made on my own, but now that you're kind of like highlighting some of these things there, like I am definitely like having some pictures pop into my mind of, oh yeah, you know what, I can kind of see that. And it's that's something that I've kind of noticed, and I got to be kind of careful how I approach this, but I found that a lot of times it's like I find that there's a disconnect between like advocating for something and then doing something about it. You know what I mean? And like it's very easy to like throw up an Instagram post to like raise awareness for something, but then to like take that a step further and like implement change there or like work toward change there. And I'll back this up. Like I noticed a problem. My brother had somebody who passed away in his graduation year driving under the influence. And to me, that was like a huge problem that there's youth out there that either might not have the tools, might not have had the education, might not have had kind of like call it risk management, call it whatever you want. I don't know if that individual or that youth group was exposed to kind of tools to make like informed decisions and to be able to kind of weigh the pros and the cons there. It would have been very easy to like post on Facebook or on Instagram, like, hey, we need to do something for youth. Like that's a very low cost kind of, I guess, action. It's great that you're raising awareness, but I find that it's, you know what I mean? It's very easy to do. I went and took that a step further and then implemented a local like nonprofit organization that has essentially worked towards educating youth and providing them with those like tools. So we've been running what 5-6 years now. We've gotten 1,200 kids through the program.
That's awesome, man.
It's great. It feels amazing. It was a ton of work though. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a ton and a ton of work. And to be honest, like it's tricky because some of it is, you can't say that it's like not somewhat self-fulfilling because you know what I mean? Like there's the kind of pressure on you as a university student that if you want to get into competitive programs and so forth, you need to be building a resume and so forth. And it wasn't about that, but at the same time, it kind of is. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
without that pressure, I don't know if I ever would have went through and kind of gone through all the meetings and put in the thousands of hours to get that program to where it is. Obviously, like I was just one part of that wheel that to get like a program like that running, it takes a lot of different people from a lot of organizations, but all those people need to put in that time. And there is kind of like an element of like selfishness to that. So, tongue in cheek, I'm saying like it's very easy to put up an Instagram post, a lot tougher to go and do something like that. But it's like, how do we find like kind of like a middle ground between sinking hundreds of thousands of hours into something and then doing more than just putting up an Instagram post? You know what I mean? Like, where is that middle ground? Because I find that if we could find a way that people can actually work towards something, and it's a little bit trickier when you start commenting on like social problems, you know what I mean, or like problems in society, because it's like, well, where do you start with those kind of things? And maybe the first step is kind of raising awareness, but there is definitely like tangible things that you could bring up, you know what I mean, like climate change, for example. Like if you're worried about that, instead of making a post about that, why don't you make it a goal of going and getting 3 bags of garbage off the beach? Like, I
Yeah.
was walking the beach yesterday. It's crazy how much plastic there is on it. And it's like, well, what if we all did that? You know what I mean? Like how
Yeah.
do you kind of like go from that low effort, like very easy like Instagram post, taking that a step further and maybe 3-4 hours of service towards that like program? And um, that's like a very interesting, like, how do you do that? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, what do you do for that?
Man, that's awesome that you took that personal responsibility on yourself and you went out and did it. And I mean, it's so true, eh? It's like if every single person saw the problems that they could see and went out and tried to fix them, how much better off would we be? It's like, it's hard to even quantify. It's interesting
Totally.
that that idea right there isn't the point of university. Rather, the point is learn about all these systems and criticize them, often flippantly and without too much depth. And just that's the game. Instead of, if there is maybe a legislative unfairness or whatever, some type of asymmetry in our society, what are the actual legitimate steps you can take to try to rectify that? Your idea, though, about it's not exactly all altruistic. There's CV lines that come from it. It's self-fulfilling in a way. This reminds me of another one of Jordan Peterson's ideas, where he says you want to act in a way that's good for you while simultaneously being good for your family, while simultaneously being good for your community, while simultaneously being good for your province and your country, right? So you want to behave in a way that's simultaneously good across all levels of abstraction. And I think that's the
Totally.
root of like change, it comes from the individual, obviously. But yeah, I'm
And
surprised that
that's,
idea is not put out.
yeah, you know what? Like I haven't heard that line of his, but as soon as you started describing that, it's like that is like a sustainable way of acting. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
if you can find something that is good for you and that also provides benefit for everybody else, like, you know what I
That's
mean?
it.
Like totally. Like you're gonna be motivated to continue doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that. Yeah. It's like that is the perfect type of motivation. Um, I guess that's what's so endearing about some business opportunities, and the opportunities that like a capitalist society provides, where it's like you actually can find situations where you're offering value, you're benefiting, your neighbors are benefiting, and society as a whole is benefiting. You can actually align the incentives.
Totally.
Yeah, it's great insight. Well, man, should we call it there?
Let's wrap it
It's a
up,
good
buddy.
way to end, buddy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
thanks so
my coffee
much.
cup's empty here.
Yeah,
I
me
need
too.
another
I'm looking
espresso.
over. I'm like, I need some more. Yeah, that was a blast, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this, man. Hopefully there was something in our rambles there that can be useful for somebody.
Dude, hopefully. Okay, I'll pause this, then we can chat a bit more.
Yeah.
Or I'll stop.